probably streaming. I'm just going to assume that we're streaming. I'm Tom Lommel, and it is time once again for Disorganized Play. So, this is my GM preparation show. We're in prep mode today, as you can see on the side of the menu. And if you are unaware, we are spoiler-tastic when it comes to Storm King's Thunder. So if you do not want to hear about this story, you need to eject yourself from the stream immediately. Bail out. Run. I don't know. Whatever you're... Just click away. Don't listen. So, all right. We have a couple things that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the cliffhanger where we left off last session. Just a quick recap. You know, my recap show happens every Thursday for the most part. Spoiler alert, it will not be happening this Thursday. I am shooting a gig, which is all I can tell you about. I will be busy on Thursday, so that means our recap show will likely be Friday. Fine and dandy, but... So we're going to talk a little bit about what happened at the end of last session, so we're have our mind frame in where we're going to go from here. I do want to talk a little bit about miniatures, some miniature options to bring to the table. As I have stated in previous streams, one of my big goals is to travel light. And I'm not always successful at that, but that doesn't mean that that we shouldn't keep trying, right? So, you know, the big disadvantage to not having a dedicated place to play and having people just come to my house and pull stuff off the shelf is I have to drag stuff with me. And it's a continuing battle to... And the thing, I don't have a bad back, really. Everything's fine. I just don't like carrying a lot of heavy stuff around. So we're going to talk about some different miniatures options that you can use at the table. And then we're going to do some session prep. So hopefully a few more people will filter in to the action. But and if we have time, we will take your questions. So if you have something that you want to bring up, you have a question about whatever's going on, or you just have a question about GM advice in general, feel free to drop those in the Twitch chat. I am monitoring that, obviously. So that's that. Oh, and what was else I was going to say besides the Q&A? Yeah. So, hopefully, if you did not have the chance, hopefully you can check out the Dungeon World game that I ran last night on Saving Throw instead of doing Monday Night Dungeon Fight. We did an adventure from Realms of Rothaeon, which is a Kickstarter that Wes Otis, one of our GMs, is running right now through Plate Mail Games. So if you go on Kickstarter and either look for Plate Mail Games or look for Rothaeon, R-O-T-H-A-E-N, you'll be able to see what he's got going there with that project and the world that he's developed, and then also there's a bunch of audio tracks that will also be with that. So we had a fun time last night. It was a little bit of a late night for me. I'm feeling a little bit drained, but we're gonna push through. So it will be fine. It will be Jim Dandy here. Everything's cool. So let's talk a little bit about where things left off last session. The party, as I talked about last Thursday on YouTube, the party, I was trying to get them involved in the orc battle. I gave them every chance to get involved in the orc battle. They had met the Zolkin and the other Zhentarim. They had met Kella and they had flirted with her, but then sort of figured out either she's in league with the Zents, or she is one of the Zents, or we're not sure what's happening. From what I can tell, they like her. They're maybe a little suspicious of her. They definitely don't like Zolkin. Okay, that's fair. I mean, I played him as kind of a jerk, and he's got it coming. Zolkin is... I figure he's got like a 17 charisma or whatever it is. He's got it coming. He can be a little cocksure. That's fine. So they ran into those guys. They freed the guards. They cleared up the city of the goblins. They leveled up to level 2. I tried to get them involved in the orc battle. They were not biting on that at all. They had left town, were on their way to the Dripping Caves to take up arms, or just actually just they've it. You know, in my mind, it's a little unclear whether they know that the villagers have been captured or whether they think they're just hanging out in refuge there. I feel like I've sort of maybe tipped the balance or given them a few too many clues about that the villagers are actually in trouble. Although the way the timeline's laid out, they're clearly in trouble because it's been 3 days since they left and they're not back yet. So it's a little bit of a mess. So you know, they'd be bad adventurers if they didn't know what was happening, that something weird was going on with the villagers. They're on their way. They've made that the #1 priority. They conned 1 guard into going. They ran into 20 orcs. They were like, we are not fighting 20 orcs, which is fair. I guess the way that the adventure is set up, they're not really supposed to have a choice about it. They're supposed to be in town, and the orcs begin attacking the place. And that's not the way it worked out. So it felt to me, it didn't work out that way because it felt to me like a little cheesy that they. It felt a little cheesy that they were the Zentrum had just shown up. Zulkin, they just had this confrontation with Zulkin, and then to have them like on their way out the bridge, and these orcs are coming up the drawbridge. I don't know. It seemed a little too coincidental. I didn't feel like I wouldn't buy it. I didn't buy it as a GM, so I didn't try and sell it to them as a GM. So that's fine. That's fine. So they get out into the woods. They encounter the orcs. They pass up the orcs. The elves come by like literally 10 minutes later. Like, did you see some orcs? Because we're here to kill orcs. Yeah, we did. Go have at it. And the elves were also kind of jerks. The elves had an interaction with the only member of the party who was a half-elf, and they sort of shamed him for being racially impure, and that was, you know, that's a garbage angle to take. It's very aggro. I think it's within the bounds of the way that the elves are described. They're wood elves. They're xenophobic. They don't like the humans. So they're going to look down on anybody who's not pure elf. And they were speaking to him in elf, so the rest of the party didn't know what exactly was transpiring. So that was also a bad interaction in terms of not earning anyone's trust. They didn't like the Zents. They did not. They avoided the orcs. They did not like the elves. They weren't incentivized to make any friends with either of those people. Like Zulkin clearly was shady, and the elves were clearly pompous and gross. So they went directly to the Dripping Caves, which means they got in a fight with the ogre, and then there's the first 2 goblin guards. And then as they tried to set up an ambush, which failed. They were not able to. The monk blew his sneak check or whatever, his stealth roll, and started to get attacked. And then the rest of the party rushed in, and then 2 members of the party got one-shotted by the ogre's great club, and they were like, "Oh, well, we need to leave." So they managed to kind of do a tactical retreat, take out 1 goblin and 1 of the ogres, and the second ogre finally had climbed out of her little nesting den or whatever and dragged her great club across the cavern floor and was just closing with the party and emerging from the cave where they had sort of set up a little choke point tactical position, and that's where we cut. So that was our cliffhanger. I was like, we're 3 rounds into it. Time at the store is we're getting tight on time. I don't like to push right up until we have to leave. Our store, luckily enough for us, is open till 11 o'clock, which is that's a long night. From I get there at 6:30, and then you're playing till 11, and the people at the store are just like, we want to get cleaned up, we want to get out, we want to get our shift over, we want to go. And so when it gets close to 10:30, I start watching the clock pretty close. So I told them, like, this is the last round, we're going to do stuff. We're going to pick up this combat next week, where the ogress closes in on the party members, and we'll start at the top of the round and work our way down. So I hope everybody shows up, which probably won't be a big deal. So that was our cliffhanger, and I don't feel bad about that. Again, I gave the tip last time that you can do some great GM prep by just snapping photos of your stat blocks with your camera phone and then pasting them into a Word doc. I snapped photos of the battle mat and of the initiative order in my phone, and those are saved, and I don't have to write them down. I can pretty much set it up without any issue next session, at the beginning of next session, have it ready to roll and just pick up where we left off. So, man, do not underestimate the usefulness of having a camera on you. Now, whether you put those things into a dedicated album on your phone, or you put them into into Evernote, or whatever your note planning or your camera management stuff is, like, I would maybe suggest finding a dedicated place to put those things, because they're not going to, like, if you put Ogre into your Google Photos search, if you sync with Google Photos, it's not going to work well. So that is where we left the session. It was interesting because I couldn't find any good hooks to get them to bite on the things that I had planned. Like, I had specifically planned a big set-piece battle between the ogre, between the orcs and the rest of the party. And again, I just want to go back to, I'm going to cover my own face up here for a minute. Hang tight. Because I want to just remind everybody, in case they weren't in the stream, that I put together, let me move this up further. There we go. I put together this battle mat. Let's bring it down a little bit. Bring it in here a little bit. There we go. So I put together this battle mat. This is free for you to download. It's in the Dropbox folder. Let me pop you a link to that. That's not the one. Dropbox. Here it is. Copy link. I copied the link, everyone. Very good. So this is a printable battle mat. We covered this last time, but I just want to remind everyone, this is a 5-page PDF that you can print off and tape together and use, and you can either do it in color like you see here or black and white, and it actually gives you most of the full layout of the terrain. It's basically one of the towers has collapsed. I made the executive decision that the Cloud Giants bouldered one of the guard towers, and that provides a breach into the interior of Nightstone. So this was a big set-piece battle map that I had all prepped and ready to go, and I couldn't find a way to work it in. That's just the way it works out. I may be bringing it back and deploying it tomorrow night, right? So before we get too deep into that, I want to talk about miniature options, and specifically, I want to talk about portable miniature options. So we're going to look at a couple different things. So the simplest thing that I have done is taken some random D&D miniatures, whether you have some of the older sets from when DDM was collectible, or you're collecting any of the new ones, say like either the Storm King's Thunder or the previous season's weird random rarity boxes, or you're doing the Pathfinder boxes or whatever you're doing. I like to have just a random assortment of miniatures that I have in... I don't even know why. You guys all know what miniatures look like. Hey, look, there they are. Wow, that was terrible. I just like to... I like something cheap that I don't care about, that I can throw in a Ziploc bag, that I don't have to worry about bending, painting, flaking off, any of that kind of stuff. And try to put like a small assortment of different character types in there so that I know, okay, that guy is the leader and these two guys are just his lieutenants, and then the rest of these guys are all just little mook orcs or whatever they end up being. I also like to use these things in case... have a couple of PC archetypes available in case we decide to go grid at the table. I generally have this season I've been trying to run Theater of the Mind, but we ended up going grid last session, and I like to have a few PC options in here just in case somebody did not bring a miniature. The downside is somebody will inevitably go, oh, you know what, I mean, this is a fighter, but I'm a half-orc fighter, and do you have anything that looks more like it? No, I don't. You know what, like, just bring... You know what, it's not going to kill you if your guy is a dwarven fighter instead of a half-orc fighter. Right? I don't have, you know, I don't have a halfling druid. I'm sorry. I don't like halflings. I'm not sorry I don't like halflings. I'm kidding, I'm kind of sorry. So that's one option, is to... So what one of my buddies did was he used to buy a case of, say, Storm King's Thunder or DDM or whatever, go through, cull out all the rares, eBay those off, and then with the money from the rares, he generally sort of recouped his investment in the case, and then he had a ton of all the commons and stuff like that to go through and just have as cheap painted minis that you don't have to paint. Now, we did have a painting show on Sunday here on Saving Throw. Go back in the YouTube archives if you did not watch it. And if you want some painting tips, Iron Tusk, who does some great work, was there leading our group. Not me personally, but leading some of the Saving Throw crew through a session of miniature painting. If you have backed any of the Reaper Bones things, and I have backed the 3 that they've done so far, then you have a lot of painting ahead of you. So we'll maybe talk about that. I love Reaper Bones for the variety that they provide, and I have a ton of them here. I didn't get them out because we all know what Reaper Bones look like, right? And the biggest issue that I have with them is I have not made the time to paint them, and so they all end up looking a little bit the same on the battle mat. It's not terrible, but it is your tiny army of abominable snowmen, right? And that's tough for me. So you can look into techniques of like dipping or airbrushing or all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to talk at length about painting miniatures. That's just not my focus today. So this is something that I like to carry around, and I don't feel bad if they get bent or whatever. I don't necessarily like the sculpts, and I'm not always a fan of what my options are when I only have 15 miniatures with me, but on the other hand, it's very light, it's very squishable, it's a great portable option. That's that. The next most common thing that I will talk about is the largely Pathfinder battle box stuff. And you can get these things. I'm not going to reach over the table and pull it out, but you can. I'm going to reach over the table and pull out one of them. Oh, shoot. I just did a bad thing on my... So this is actually from the Tome of Beasts that Kobold Press put out, but you can get these packs either for the Paizo Adventure Paths or like just to cover their monster codex and stuff like that. And these are cardboard punchable figures, right? Little figures. Just you put them on a standee, and boy, I've made a huge mistake in deciding that I was going to do that. All right. Okay. You do not want to know what's happening on the other side of the table over here. It is I clear a space to work, and I clear enough space for my wife to sit here and have coffee in the morning, and the rest of the table tends to get a little disorganized. Now, the great thing about these is, again, they're portable. I've got a bag of standees. Honestly, I've decided to organize these. You could just keep them in a Ziploc bag. I just got a little plastic box, and you don't have to have a scissors in there, but I put my standees and I put my cardboard things in there, and it's light. They don't get, they don't get dinged up because they're in the box. I can put them in a snack bag, and like this snack bag is all drow, so that's pretty cool. I could label these if I was a little more organized, but I went through and I was like, let me pull all the drow. Boom, they're in a snack bag. Now if I need an army of drow, done. I've got 18 or 20 drow that I can pull out and deploy as I see fit. So that's pretty nice. These little bag of standees, they come in a bunch of different sizes. So this is the big advantage to these things is if I want to drop a clockwork dragon or a weird juggernaut beetle on the table, I can do that, but they only take up this much space in my bag. And this is really handy to me because having a huge creature like this on the battlefield just makes that psychological impression that raises the stakes in the game, right? So that is, I mean, I would love to just have a D&D miniature or a full-size 3D fig, Reaper or whatever, McFarlane Dragon. I have a variety of those, etc. I have a bunch of different miniatures. That may be a different topic at some point if you want to get a little more fancy with toys. But Griffin makes the exact point. For a traveling DM, this is ideal to give that sort of experience of, oh no, like a huge monster just arrived on the battlefield without having to eat up a bunch of room in your bag. So the next option that I'm going to share with you, so the next thing is a spin-off on that, and you can get printable little cardstock miniatures off of Drive-Thru RPG, RPG Now, whatever you want to call it. I have a bunch of these things from my old 3.0 days, and you just get a little plastic stand, and this also doesn't take up much room. Honestly, it's the standee that takes up the most room. These are also kind of disposable, so if you want to write on them or number on them or just print off as many as you need, these little cardstock characters are perfect for that. So Fiery Dragon Press are the guys who have a pile of these. If you like Claudio Posas's art style, he did a gajillion of these things, and you can generally get them for fairly cheap. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, Griffin, you make a very good point in terms of carrying that giant miniature around. I will often, if I have a surprise monster that I want to drop on the table, like, oh, check this out, guess what's going to happen now? It just got real. Then I'll probably wrap it in a shopping bag, like a plastic grocery bag or something like that that's opaque, and so they can't really tell maybe necessarily what it is. But the other part of it is those toys get kind of finicky, like if they get bent, stuff like that, and they don't stand up right, blah, blah, blah. It's just, for traveling, I only drop those things on special occasions. So you can also just get some blank, I got some blank miniature cards from the Game Crafter. If you go to a con where they are, they often have samples for you to prototype stuff with, and I will grab a very short stack of those things. These are actually things that they donated to me to run a workshop for board gaming for teens, and we had some leftovers, so I thought I would put them to use. And I use these little cards. These little cards are great for two reasons. They're super portable. They make great table tents that don't take up a lot of room, and then also just the paper, the type of paper that they are, picks up ink really nicely compared to an index card, which is a little flat. And I always find that an index card, while I love it and I always have them with me, they're not this form factor, right? So I don't need a full index card to put the character's name and armor class on there. I can get most of the information. I fold this thing in half and that's it. So same thing if I want to make monsters, I can cut this in half, draw a little something on there in case there's a special monster or something that just I don't have a figure for or whatever, and potentially move those around. And that's why that's one of the reasons I carry scissors in this bag. So, you know, I really feel like scissors should be in your GM's kit. Unfortunately, I do a lot of GMing where I travel, and having a scissors in your bag can get you in trouble with our friends at the Friendly TSA. Our friends. Oh. Also a good reason to carry some tape, right? So those are those things. The last option that I'm going to show you in terms of our portable miniatures solutions here is unfortunately something I don't think you can buy anymore. I believe these came from Fortress Miniatures, Fortress Figures is what they may have been. So these are blood elves, some weird type of like skeleton warrior guys, a ton of goblins, and a ton of zombies. And I carry the whole thing in these two small container tubes, and the nice thing about it is they are 3D. They're colored, so I don't have to paint them. They look like blood elves. They look like skeleton warriors. They look like goblins on the battlefield. Like nobody cares that they don't have a lick of paint on them. They're fairly durable. I've had these things for 10 or 15 years. They were dirt cheap when I want to say it was like $3 for a pack of them, and I was like, yeah, I will buy. I should have bought more because I think the company went out of business. They're just little like epoxy resin figures. Let me get a couple out. So I took a fine tip Sharpie and I just wrote a number on the base of each of them. So let's see. I don't know if that's going to focus or not, but that's your problem and not mine. Maybe. Anyway, you get the idea. So on the bottom, you can see I just wrote the number 10. That way, if I have 20 goblins, but they have a ton of hit points, then I can say, what number, you know. The only issue with these, of having them numbered on the bottom, is they're rarely facing one of the players. So when you say, oh, which one was that? Then they have to go in, and there's this whole thing where they pick up, and they have to pick up the miniature. Oh, all right, is that a 2 or is that a 7? Or whatever. And then they put it back down, right? I'll show you. Another cheap option for this is if you go on Amazon. So these guys are these guys became affectionately known as disco zombies because they kind of look like they're dancing. Not so much this guy, but mostly these guys. So those are our disco zombies. And yeah, you can check on Amazon for cheap stuff like this. I looked. A lot of them are not to scale. You can find for the Zombies game, the Zombies board game, where you're all trying to escape, and they have 6 million different supplements for it. You can get like a bag of 100 zombies for, I don't know, like less than $10. I haven't looked recently. It's cheap. I have some of those. I have the glow-in-the-dark ones that I will sometimes use as ghosts or what have you. So those are all right. It's just the pose is a little limited, and they all look like They're all exactly the same. But those are definitely like not a bad placeholder, and they're still available. These, I don't know where you would get these. It was Fortress Figures was the company, and man, if I could go back and buy twice as many, I would, just because it's really handy to carry these around in a small form factor. The Skeleton Warriors, you know, the sculpt isn't bad. It's the Skeleton Warrior. You can't see the detail on this as much. The skull is a little cheesy looking, but who cares? I mean, the rest of it looks pretty cool, and everybody always freaks out when you drop a skeleton, especially if you make this guy the boss guy. They always freak out when there's like 8 of these Blood Elf dudes. Yeah, I don't know that. I'm sure my focus is bad. I apologize for that. All right. You drop like 8 of these Blood Elf dudes, and then you put one skeleton guy in the back, and everybody's like, "Oh, what's happening?" So that's my. I always put these in for my regular home game. I always have these things in my bag, just because that bag is a little bit bigger, because I'm never quite as sure what they're going to get into, and I don't have to stick to the script as closely because it's not Adventurers League. But I always like to have, you know, it's a small container, and it takes some abuse. It's not going to ding up my books or anything like that. It's not heavy like a hard case of miniatures or anything like that. So that's just kind of a little tour of different miniatures solutions that I have come across. You know, look, you're running and gunning as a DM, kind of any port in a storm, whatever it takes to get the job done, right? Honestly, your ability to describe what's happening is far more important than what's being represented on the battlefield. So in terms of like literal miniatures, it would be great if every session we had a giant setup of Dwarven Forge and fully painted Reaper miniatures that exactly represented every single thing that was happening. But if you're disorganized like me, you either have not painted those miniatures or not picked up the proper ones, or you just don't have time to think that far ahead. So, or the money. So those are our miniature solutions. So again, if you guys have questions about running a game, or I did want to say one of the advantages to going back and watching the Dungeon World game that I ran last night is, if you get a chance to look it up, it's about 4 hours, so 3.5, something like that. Not only does it give you a good introduction to the realms of Rothane, but it also showcases my ability to do descriptive combat and to describe and interpret dice results without a lot of heavy D20 mechanics being involved. And in Dungeon World, the DM almost never rolls the dice, so I don't mean to point you at that like in a braggadocious way that, oh, you know, check out the great job that I did or anything like that. It's more, I think, instructive, like, let me see what it's like to run a more narrative game where, you know, honestly, like, there were several times where I had to decide something good is going to happen, but also something bad is going to happen. And oftentimes the something bad that was going to happen for the party was, for the characters, a bad thing, but for the game, it was a good thing. And specifically what I'm talking about is the druid maybe, you know, chased down one of the goblins and killed it, but got a mixed result where something good happened and something bad happened. Well, the bad thing that happened was the rest of the goblins got away, and they went to warn the witches that were performing the ritual, all right? That was bad for the party. Oh no, we've given ourselves away. We've given the enemy a heads up. But that was good for the metagame because we finished a combat. The tediousness of you shooting orcs over and over and over again, or whatever it was, is now over. We've raised the stakes, the situation has been resolved, and we can start moving on to the next scene of the evening's events. So that's one reason I would say, that's the main reason I would say play Dungeon World, is if you want to hone your ability to improvise and to interpret results in a way that establishes stakes and consequences and does not just result in kind of a binary fighting versus unconscious type of situation. Give it a try. They're having a huge sale over at Drive-Thru RPG right now on all of the Apocalypse World based systems, of which Dungeon World is one of them. So you can get Dungeon World for cheap, and you can get a ton of extras and add-ons and other miscellaneous things that have been created for all of those systems. The other company that I would suggest you check out is, I believe it's called Lamp Black and Brimstone. They did a Kickstarter called Servants of the Cinder Queen, and if you want to look at an amazing stripped down format of how to lay out the skeleton of an interesting adventure in about 12 booklet sized pages, get Servants of the Cinder Queen. It is absolutely, like, it will give you a million different ideas on how you can restructure your notes, how you think about planning your session, how you think about just structuring an adventure. I don't know, I might have repeated myself there, but like I said, I'm a little tired today. So, I can't, like, I backed that Kickstarter and it was like $5, and it's easily like one of the hugest, biggest bangs for my buck that I ever got out of a Kickstarter, and that was for the print product. It was like $5 or $8, and yeah, I mean, admittedly, it's a little black and white booklet that the guy put together and just dropped in the mail to us, but it's nicely illustrated, nicely laid out, and the ideas are fantastic. So check those things out if you have any sort of like remote interest in Dungeon World, that style of game, etc. Go over to Drive-Thru. I hope the sale is still going on. I'm not sure how much longer it's happening, but it's definitely worth it. And Lamp Black and Brimstone, the Servants of the Cinder Queen in specific, but the other products are also a great value. They do a thing called Funnel World, which you may recognize from Goodman Games DCC, Dungeon Crawl Classics, DCRPG, etc. So that's my little GM. Make yourself a better GM. Check that stuff out. That's all I got for that. All right. Now let's brainstorm a little bit about what's going to happen next session. So we've got 3 different options here. So I sat down this morning and made just sort of a little checklist. I start prepping a session by asking myself, what questions are unresolved? What possibilities lay in front of us that are left open from last session? So, as I said at the top of the show in the recap, we left on sort of a cliffhanger where mid-combat, a fresh ogre just entered the fray. They have set up a choke point that they're hoping to defeat this thing. The alarm has been raised in the caves. That should have the players freaking out a little bit. In the module as written, there's not a lot to freak out about because there's only 2 more goblins who are even going to bother showing up, which is fine. They're only 2nd level. Like, if they can defeat this other ogre, I think they're going to be happy. So the questions that I have in front of me, assuming that they survive the combat with the 2nd ogre, and I don't think there's any way to avoid that situation. I don't think they're going to show up at the table and go, oh, we just do tactical retreat and we completely run away. Well, that's fine, but that combat's got to be resolved one way or the other. I'm guessing they'll probably try and murderate the thing, but they could just all disengage and run, in which case the ogre runs after them. It says so. So the questions that I have, like the possibilities that I left open in my notes, are after that combat is resolved, they could go further into the cave. They could retreat and take a short rest and maybe do some scouting or do some other type of tactical repositioning, plan-making thing. They were not very good about making a plan in the previous session. They had come up with this ambush where most of the party kind of hid outside in the sunlight, and then the monk was going to sneak in and leave a trail of gold pieces that led out, and then they were going to throw a gold piece in and hope that the ting would attract the ogre and or some of the guards. It didn't work because the monk blew his stealth roll. So, but it took a long time for them to talk each other into or agree on what the final plan was going to be, and it took it wasn't. I hate to be super judgmental because they're only like first or second level, and a couple of the players are very new, but it wasn't a great plan. I mean, it is literally something that my friends and I did in junior high, which was to just dump a bag of gold pieces out the front of the cave and yell, "Oops, I dropped all my gold pieces." So that's the level of strategy we were working with. That's fine. That can be fun. Like if he would have made his stealth roll, it would have been more interesting to see it attempt to work. Didn't work. Fine. They resolved that combat. I think they'll retreat, and they could. One of their second possibility is to retreat and make a new plan, whatever that might be. They might scout the surrounding areas for a back way in which case some good rolls could find them some different ways into the Dripping Caves. They might form a new plan or try to ally themselves with somebody else to try to get into the caves and make more of a full frontal tactical push. However, given the fact that they will at that point have fought 2 ogres, and they must assume that those guys are the warm-up troops and that the big boss is somewhere deeper in the caves, they're probably going to be a little skittish about making a full-on assault in the caves. Their third option that I've laid out, or not necessarily laid out, but the third option that I'm considering preparing for. I'm sure there's more things, but the 3 most obvious things that I think are going to happen are they push into the cave, they pull back and they take a short rest and regain some of their abilities and regain some hit points, or they head back to town. So they may just turn around and go, you know what, we need to find those elves, or we need to cut a deal with Zulkin, or we need to get the rest of those guards back, or whatever it is, because we're in over our head. So Griffin makes the point that they could have done some cursing in Orcish or something like that. That is a great idea. That would have helped their case immensely. The issue being none of them speak Orcish. I think a couple of them have doubled up on Giant, but no one speaks Orcish. They speak Elvish, they speak Dwarven, they speak Gnomish, and Giant, and I don't think there's any of the other like Orcish or Goblinoid languages or anything like that. I have been considering having a chat with them prior to them leveling up to level 5 and just saying, guys, do you want to be a fighty party or do you want to be a stealthy party? Because right now you're trying to have it both ways and it's not working for either of you. Like, they're sending their monk ahead as the stealth guy, but they have also been making a lot of group stealth rolls, like when the orcs came rolling through, and a couple of them are in full plate or whatever, or just don't have the ranks, and have been botching those. A couple of them are at disadvantage because they're armor, and have been botching those rolls. And I feel like it's worth having the conversation of, are those 4 points of armor class worth blowing your stealth rolls? And I don't care. I don't want to advocate for either position, but I think it might be a reasonable conversation to have with the group of players and say, you're having, you're dipping your toes in the best of both worlds here, and it's just not working out. You're straddling the fence, and it's not a successful thing for you. If you want to be a party that can talk their way out of situations and that can stealth their way or disguise their way, Basically, old school, as we would say, soch your way out of a particular encounter, then you all kind of need to be on board with that as a party, because it's not really working for you right now. If you want to be the group that's 5 dudes who smash and trash the entire time, that's fine too. I don't care, but you have to. I think I might tell them. Or I just might broach that discussion with them, either in our private Facebook group that I put together, or just at the table, maybe when we're sitting around waiting for other people to show up, just to sow that seed. It's something to think about. We have a couple sessions before we even get close to level 5, so we'll see how these encounters in the Dripping Caves pay out. So they may go back to town. Those are our 3 options. Those are the things that I'm prepared to invest some brainwaves in thinking about to help me get ahead of tomorrow night's session. So just on a pure organizational level, I want to recap for you what my logistical approach to prepping this type of thing is. So once I've got a notebook here where I've written down, my questions, what's going to happen, blah blah blah, right? As I go through, I make little notes, etc. I don't often put a ton of brainstorming things in a notebook like this, and I gotta tell you why. It is because I have a real problem where I will start thinking of something and start making some notes, and then I'll start thinking of something else, and then I either have to draw a line or box it out and try and keep it organized, and it drives me nuts to have to keep flipping back and forth, or it's not on the same page. Sometimes what I will do is I will take, have I done it anywhere in here? I will take a ruler and I'll draw I'll just draw along the side. I'll draw myself a margin so I can put like little, not related to whatever's going on in the main body of the text, I can put little notes or little action items or to-dos, something like that. If you ever look at there's a thing called the Meeting Book by Rhodia. If you look at the Meeting Book by Rhodia, it is laid out almost exactly like that, where it has a margin for a little action item to do things, and then has a place for notes, and it's very nicely boxed off, and that's fine. Problem is, it still has defined borders, and that sort of stuff just drives me a little bit nuts. So I get out my index cards, and the great thing about these is these are as big or as small as I need them to be. So I've divided my index cards into my 3 different options. Right now I've only done the first 2, but actually the second 2. So retreat to take a short rest. I make a little header, and now I run down any thoughts that I have about that particular scenario. If I get to the bottom of the page, like I have with my retreat to town notes, and guess what? I just add another index card and put a 2 on it, or whatever number, I mean, it's not rocket science here, right? The point being, though, that I have a discrete way to separate these things. I can look at all of them at the same time without having to flip back and forth, and it's as expandable as I need it to be. And then secondly, if they pick one of those options, I can just pull that section of notes and have it here in front of me and put the rest of them away, It remains to be seen whether I'll be able to keep them organized, but I can just put those to the side. There's plenty of index card organizer boxes or whatever you can buy if you're so interested. But for me, this is a really powerful, efficient way to organize my ideas. All right. So I don't want to spend any more time talking about the logistical way that I'm putting my notes together, but this morning as I was doing it, I was like, I'm very happy with the way that this system works. And I don't have to get distracted by having electronics in front of me more than I already do with my phone. And it really puts things in a way that is discrete and organized, but also feels disposable to me, so that if I want to erase something or cross something out or just start a card over, I can, and I don't feel bad about it for crapping up, a $15 notebook with Garbage. That's just the way my brain works. Hopefully as I've said before, hopefully your brain works differently. All right, so a couple things. Let's start with retreat to short rest. So they may go into the caves. I'm not going to address what happens if they go into the caves. I haven't put a lot of thought into it. I need to decide a couple things about the caves. I need to decide what happened with the wagon full of ale. Are all of the goblins drunk on that? Is Boss Hark hoarding it? Did he give some out? What is the status of that? Where is it? Where can it be found? How much of it is left? Like, those things need to be decided. And I think when I decide those, then I'll have a better idea of what's going on in the rest of the complex when it comes to what the prisoners, what state the prisoners are in, what state the prisoners are in, what state of alert the rest of the goblins are in. As written, the module says nobody else is going to show up. Well, there's got to be a reason for that. Are they lazy? Do they hate each other? I think, a very good reason is they're either all drunk or they are sleeping one off. So I just want to remind everybody, while we're talking about what happens in the Dripping Caves, that I put together one of these encounter keys for the Dripping Caves that is a traced outline of the map, and then it has arrows indicating each and every encounter or creature in the area, where they're located, and just generally like what their name is. It's very small for me on my screen, but hopefully you have a good look at that. That's in the Dropbox. If you want that, right there. So I will probably be using this if they go in, but I need to sit down and make some notes about what's happening in here. And like I said, those decisions are all going to be informed by the fact that 3 goblins got away with this entire wagon full of ale. It goes back to the question of, did Morak even order ale, or because he made a special order from this sketch dude who's a known fence in Waterdeep, maybe there's something else in those barrels. That could be a really interesting hook, is they think that the goblins have gotten their hands on a bunch of ale and are drunk, and it turns out the goblins have gotten their hands on a bunch of fireworks or alchemist fire or whatever, and they're ready to go to town, like all-out warfare. Doesn't seem like a particularly nice move to pull when they're only 2nd level, the party's only 2nd level, but that's not my problem. Well, it could be my problem if I kill them all. All right, so those are things that we're going to decide about the Dripping Caves, and what I have to put some more thought into that. We may not stop right at 3 o'clock. It just depends upon how much talking. We don't have to stop right at 3 o'clock. I like to keep these things to an hour, so we got about 7 minutes left. Let's see how we do. All right. So the next option that I have written down here, which you probably can't read, is retreat and take a short rest after the combat ends. I feel like this is highly likely. This is the most likely scenario. I suppose if I was a more organized DM, I would rate these things from like most likely to least likely. Whatever. So one thing that I have to think about off screen is, do the goblins, now that they've been alerted, because there's at least 2 goblin guards further in the back who heard the cry of alarm. Do they go off and tell Boss Hark something's going on? Do the goblins now form sort of an order? Like, does the complex go on alert? As written, it is not supposed to happen that way. On the other hand, they're getting a free short rest in there. There should be some sort of consequence attached to that, probably. One of the things I've considered is maybe the goblins move some prisoners into sort of a very open hostage type of situation where they've all got nooses tied around their necks, or they're something off. They're tied to a post, and there's goblin guards ready to stab and execute them, etc. Or, as I've said before, are they drunk, hungover, overconfident? So during this short rest, a variety of things that can happen, or at the end of the short rest, there's a variety of things that can happen. Number one, I think the most obvious thing in terms of things that could happen to the party as opposed to things that the party could initiate. They could get done with their short rest and then go scouting or head to a different area. Those are the things that the party could do. I don't think there's a lot of other possibilities for active things that the party could do. In terms of encounters that the party could have, I think the most obvious one is that the elves come back through, having defeated the orcs. They come back through and kind of brag and sneer and give the party some crap. And they've already indicated they're not really interested in fighting, just in saving the villagers. They don't care about humans. But if the party says, we fought 2 ogres and we don't know how many more are in there, and there's probably a pile of goblins in here, if they make a reasonable plea, I think the wood elves might be willing to join them. If that happens, then I have to think about potentially either altering the number of goblins and the encounters that happen in the Dripping Caves if they've got 5 extra party members, or I have to think about toning down the elves and either like making the elves more banged up from their encounters with the orcs, or just making them not as powerful as whatever they are, scouts or whatever they are. So that's something they could have the elves come back through. And the elves could also, like, the elves could pass along information that, oh, you know, it turns out that the Zents were defeated. Like, we got there and we just barely saved the town. They could pass along news of what happened in that battle and how the people that they left behind are doing, because the elves do not care about those people, but the party might. So that might motivate them to go back to town. And I don't know what the next encounter there is, other than they would have to confront Kella and or possibly Zolkin and whoever's left and talk seriously about, can we get your help, and maybe bargain for some sort of favor or something like that, right? Because I think sending another group of orcs after them that's a cheap shot. But if they successfully negotiate some sort of truce or whatever with Zolkin and the Zents, then I think, all right, you've earned your level up to level 3, and now we'll go explore the rest of the caves. Or if they decide that the Zents are gonna come along, if they negotiate that, then maybe we just skip that part of it and send the whole group into the Dripping Caves. So that's what it looks like at the, coming out of the outside of that short rest. Farquaad gives the suggestion that a wise elder stops and talks to them about what's going on, etc. And I will say that it is a little bit, voice of the DM feeling, in terms of like trying to shepherd them a little bit harder than maybe usual. If you watched last night's game, the party was in the middle of this horribly dangerous swamp, and they had decided to camp during the middle of the day and take a break, and the paladin did not need to sleep or eat, so the paladin was on watch. And one of the encounters I rolled was a helpful local comes by. And that was actually a great way to inject kind of the DM clue bat in a very soft touch kind of way. Actually, it turned out that that the friendly local was really just a hallucination, a divine hallucination that the paladin was having, because the paladin was worshipped a god of drink, and so spent a lot of his time communing with the god of drink. And so he was having an alcohol-induced delusion but it turns out that this guy was passing along legit information, right? But when the party woke up, the players or the characters were like, you saw a what? Because there's no evidence this guy was here, and you're sure that this wasn't just you having some sort of fever dream? Oh no, you know. So the friendly local is not a bad option. I think it's a little early to have an NPC have that conversation about, do you want to be a stealth party or be a combat kick in the doors kind of party. I feel like that's more of a metagame discussion than it is an in-game, you know, relationship or role-play discussion. So the other encounter that I am considering is just reading ahead and looking down the road for what sort of plot planks we have to nail into place in order to get the arc of our campaign kind of rolling along smoothly. It's my opinion that Harshnag basically, you know, at the end of chapter 3, he basically tracks them down and is like, I've heard good things about you. And it just does not feel particularly organic to me. It feels it just drops a little too abruptly, and I would like to make that relationship a little more seamless. So I am very much considering here in the opening chapter having them encounter Harshnag briefly and probably on his way someplace. So I suspect that he is on his way to Waterdeep to get some information or to consult with someone. And since this is the road that comes out of the Desserin Valley and leads to Waterdeep, there's no reason he could have traveled this way, right? It's certainly plausible. They came from Waterdeep, so it makes sense that he would be going there. In which case, they have this opportunity as second-level characters to encounter this frost giant who is actually friendly, who could kill them without blinking, and establish some sort of relationship with him, or at least make an impression, or have him make an impression. I don't know what this encounter looks like. It could be as simple as you hear a kind of a low whistling sound coming through the woods, and he's got his axe over his shoulder, and he's just tromping along in a fine mood. It could be something where I've considered like pushing it to almost the other extreme, where the goblins have somehow captured him and are keeping him sedated in the dripping caves until they can figure out a way to charm him, in which case the party could free this thing. And if you look at the map, an especially great place to do that would be at the back of this, at the straight back of this cavern, where there's the crevasse that goes down 20 or 30 feet or whatever it is. Imagine that there's maybe a couple logs that are placed over this thing, and he is, you know, hung over them, strapped, you know, by the shoulders or whatever, and goblins come back there and every 2 hours feed him more of this weird, you know, fly swatter juice or whatever they put together to keep him groggy and out of it. And then if the party can free him, that would be amazing, right? So that's something to consider. Like, if they can free him and then he comes back around in chapter 4 and goes, you guys helped me out before, I need you to help me out again. Like, that is a terrific, like, that's a terrific hook. I really love this idea that Harshnag somehow got captured by the goblins and he's held prisoner by them, and the party has the opportunity to free him. So that's another thing I need to put on my list for pushing into the dripping caves. But I could just have an encounter with him at the end of the short rest. They hear him whistling and coming through the woods, and then the questions that we next have to ask out of there is, does he join the party? Does he just give them advice? Does he decide, oh, I'm going to go investigate what happened in Nightstone? Now that's an interesting proposition, right? Maybe this is how Harshnag finds out that the ordning is broken and, you know, stuff is going down, is he shows up and sees what the Cloud Giants did in Nightstone, and he's like, I've got to get back to my people. In which case, we really have... it makes the entire plot sort of flow more seamlessly. It makes things make a ton more sense without feeling particularly railroady and without necessarily being that's a little too much of a coincidence, because he disappears for 2 more chapters and then finally shows up again, right? So that's something to consider with Harshnag. I really like the idea of bringing him back in. So that's our short rest option. Obviously, we're going over a little bit here, but that's okay. I talked about miniatures for a lot longer than I expected to. Finally, we're going to talk through Retreat to Town. So they could get done with their battle here and decide, we don't want to camp in the woods. Who knows, those goblins may come out and get us again. It's not that far away. It's only a mile away. Let's go back to town. In which case, we could join the orc battle in progress, right? So we get to roll out that battle mat that we made last week, and we get to have that big set-piece combat that we talked about, but we get to join it in media res, right? So in which case, the questions we need to answer for ourselves is, like, all right, so if Zolkin and company decided to defend Nightstone, and the orcs showed up and tried to run the gap in this... Let me bring it back. Let me bring it back. Well, I'm going to bring it back. I'm going to bring it back over the top of myself. So if they try and run the gap, and Zolkin and the company, like, held them off the choke point, like, how many forces did it take to try and take down the Zents? Like, did the Zents mostly get pummeled, or did the Zents actually manage to largely hold their own with some amount of probably significant losses? Because 20 orcs is nothing to sneeze at, and those thugs who are traveling with Zolkin are not particularly powerful. Or, you know, the elves were only like 10 minutes behind. That's not, you know, in combat time, that's not, that's huge, but we could also sort of hand wave that a little bit. Did the elves sit on the other side of the bank and start picking off the orcs and their rear flank, at which case the party has the option of swimming over there and engaging the orcs, or maybe trying to get the drawbridge to come down and help them out. Did the orcs manage to bust through the line on the inside and go up and open the drawbridge? Are there 2 forces of orcs? Is there one group of orcs who's working on chopping down the drawbridge or creating another breach? Have they split up? That sort of thing. So we have a lot of questions to ask ourselves in terms of what's the status of this battle, and we can make it very exciting. We can draw some high stakes attached to the situation as they walk into it. But it's a fun opportunity if they go directly back to town. I like the idea that maybe the elves don't actually care about Nightstone, and they don't want to cross into Nightstone, and they've maybe stand on principle that we will not set foot into human territory, so they sit on the banks and just snipe with their bows and take pot shots at the orcs and kind of let the Zents do all the upfront fighting and try and keep the gap closed. Or did the orcs come rolling in, slaughter all of the Zents, and maybe take Kella prisoner? You know, that's going to bring her probably back around to the sympathetic side for the party if they get to rescue her a second time. She does sort of prove to be as frail as she claimed she was last session. So that's also an option, is that the Zents didn't hold up, and the orcs have taken over the town from the goblins, and they're roaming free. Now, I would probably severely diminish the number of orcs, but it could be that the elven scouts are like, well, there's 5 of us now, there's still 15 orcs left. they've got a tactical advantage on us. Let's regroup and think about what we're going to do, or maybe wait for nightfall or whatever. So you have the possibility there where the party shows up and the elves are trying to suss out what their next move is, while the orcs maybe take up tactical positions inside town. So that's something to consider. If that whole thing sort of gets rectified one way or the other, so if the elves take over the town and wipe out the orcs, let's assume that the orcs get wiped out one way or another. Either there's the conflict between the Zents and the elves, because they're not going to get along, the humans and the elves, that the party could mediate, or there's no conflict because the Zents have been eliminated and the elves have taken over the town, or there's no conflict because the Zents and the elves have managed to fight them off, but the elves have decided, okay, we've done our job, the orcs are dead, we're out of here. One of the questions I have is, if the elves are victorious and the Zents are eliminated in some way, shape, or form, what do the elves think about the bombardment of Nightstone? Are they aware that this Cloud Giant castle came sailing over? You know, the place has been wrecked. They're probably happy about that. Do they use this as an opportunity to destroy the rest of the town? Like, let's set fire to Nightstone so that they can't rebuild? Like, I could see the elves being, like, Jerko Supremo about this particular situation, given the circumstances set up in the book where it's not friendly, right? They definitely have very strained relations, and I think this is an opportunity that the leader is dead, a huge portion of the town has been destroyed. Like, let's just finish the job and make it harder for them to come back. The other question that arises in my mind is, if they see that this ancient monolith has been excavated and removed, does that set something off in their mind where they go, oh, we have one of those deep in our forest? Are the giants going to come after the one? I mean, we've never done anything with it. We can't puzzle out what it is. We know it's of giantish origin. Maybe we need to be concerned about what's going on here. Which, you know, that just poses, again, like, it introduces the idea that there's something larger happening and that there might be stakes. And if the elves are worried about this, maybe the players need to kind of be thinking about it as well. So that's something that I think could be an interesting development to introduce. BSB Care poses the question, how dickish are your elves in this? In general, my elves are not, right? But in the background to Chapter 1, they talk about how these are wood elves. They're very xenophobic. They live in the forest just outside of town. And the nobles from Waterdeep have been coming up and settling Nightstone and been hunting in their forest and taking game and basically infringing on territory that these wood elves feel is theirs. And I just get the vibe in general in the Forgotten Realms that wood elves in particular are the jerks. They're like, keep to themselves. They have their defined boundaries. We stay in our forest. We don't stray into your human civilized areas in any number. We don't, make incursions into your territory to pick fights and steal your resources. So stay out of ours, or we're going to rain down some poisonous garbage on you. So in this particular circumstance, my elves are extremely dickish. Are they dickish enough to set the entire town on fire? Is a very good question. They might be, and it's no big deal. Like, asking questions like that is 100% like, these are details that some people latch onto, and sometimes in some people's game it'll never come up because the party will never encounter those elves, and you'll never know that it happened, right? It's just that my group happened to come across them. So if they hadn't, we wouldn't even be having this discussion right now, most likely. But because because it's in the book that way, like I'm picking up that ball and I'm running with it. So the final option in terms of their retreat to town and the aftermath of the battle, or the battle being in medias res. Now, if we go back, several of you have said, I like the idea of the orcs succeeding. And I'm generally a fan of this idea, and I'm also a fan of the elves not quite being sure if they want to walk into what is a tactically unsound situation for them. If the orcs take over the town and then they've got cover behind these walls and they control basically sort of the one entry point to it, and there's only 5 elves, then the elves, they're like, I don't know if it's worth it. Maybe we'll just wait them out. Maybe we can kind of put them under siege and wait for them. It doesn't take that many. It doesn't take that many elves. We could send somebody back and get some more help and try and deal with the situation in force rather than just the 5 of us. But if we decide that the orcs have won and the elves are kind of holding back and just taking stock of the situation, we have another opportunity here after the players show up and assess the situation to again introduce Harshnag if we so choose. So he can come, like you said in the chat, rolling Andy Griffith style down the road, barefoot and happy with his giant battle axe over his shoulder, and then decide, oh, you need help? I can help. Orcs, they're a plague. I don't think that's a good voice for him. I want to maybe make him a little more Swedish Chef, but I don't want to make him a total cartoon. But at any rate, I think we have an opportunity where, like, let's team up with the big bad guy, and the big bad guy. No, Harshnag is definitely not the big bad guy, but let's team up with this giant with his enormous axe. Let's bring in basically our portable siege engine and march our Panzer tank into the middle of town and just start crushing stuff. Now, maybe Harshnag isn't that careful about whether a glancing blow hits the barn or not either, although I don't want to play him as, like, completely careless and awful. But there is a possibility there for Harshnag to show up, do some good on behalf of the party, but then have a reason like, well, I've helped you out here, it's been nice talking to you little people, oh, this is, and again it goes back to maybe Harshnag now sees where this thing was, and we have a discussion about, like, oh, no, I need to find out more about this, where not, so that we telegraph to the players, this is the beginning of something that even the giants don't all necessarily know what's happening. So don't worry, don't get too far ahead of, like, there's something horrible is happening, we got to get to the bottom of it right away, because that's been my problem with previous Adventure League seasons, is that they introduced, like, this enormous this enormous conflict where demons are bleeding in from other planes and are taking over the Underdark, and you're like, okay, well, let's get on it, let's kill some demons, and they're like, no, first I need you to go over here and clearing out, there's some werewolves, and there's a ghost whose spirit needs to be put to rest, and I don't know if you're aware, but there's a couple of drow who, and it's like, and you're like, a couple drow? Who cares? What? Like, I don't give a crap about your were-rat infestation. There's demons from the abyss. So I don't want to put the party in that sort of situation right now where they feel like they have to solve things immediately, that it's an urgent conflict that needs to be addressed when they're only level 2. But I do want to show the idea that, there's the basis for a mystery that is developing. And I think that's something that we could do by having Harshnag show up and become alerted to something strange. And that's all he really has to do at that point, right? So, those are sort of the options that I have if they decide to retreat to town. So we can either have the orc battle in progress and have a nice big set piece fight. And I don't know, if they've taken a short rest or not. If they go back to town and the orc battle isn't, they can't take a short rest, because at that point, if they've spent an hour short resting and then they come back to town, we have to know, okay, either the orcs won, or the elves won, or the Zents won, or whatever. But that battle has long been over with. An hour later, they go back to town. It's done. Something else is set the stage. So that's our timeline is something that we very much have to pay attention to when we leave off on a cliffhanger like this, where it matters whether they've had a short rest, and it matters where things were set in motion after they left. So those are our major things to consider. Is if they come back directly, then I think the main opportunity there is to have a big set piece battle. You could still have Harshnag wade into the middle of it if things are going badly. We've got to find a way for the players to make an active and heroic impact in the battle, but those are the decisions that we're looking at if they go directly back after the little fight with the ogres. If they go directly back to town, we need option 2 if they take a short rest and then go back to town and try and rally forces. So those are the scenarios I'm looking at. I'm looking at alternate timelines. Those are the things I'm going to have to puzzle over a little bit further in order to get my mind organized for tomorrow night's session. That's where my prep is at right now. So I'm going to do a little more noodling on this evening yet, and probably a little bit tomorrow morning, and then go run a game. So if you have questions or something like that, we've run over time. We're 20 minutes over, so please feel free to pop questions at Dungeon Bastard on the Twitter, and I will try and take them if you have questions about GMing or you have suggestions for any of the topics that I could cover here within the scope of GM prep and Adventurers League play. Or if you have a suggestion, like we talked about miniatures, and you're like, oh, hey, by the way, I have used this to great effect, that would also be very helpful. So other than that, I do want to say I will not be here on Thursday. For those of you who joined a little bit midstream here, I have booked a gig, which is about all I can say about that. But as most of you hopefully know, I am a professional actor, and I shall be doing some professional acting on Thursday. So our recap stream will not be on Thursday. The recap stream most likely will be on Friday, and we'll be looking at the same time. Probably 4 o'clock is what I'm thinking, but I'll just have to coordinate that based on what my day is like on Thursday, and what kind of holes develop in the schedule in terms of who's playing what, etc. So normally we would be back Thursday at 4, and I would tell you the results of how my preparation did not work, but you're going to have to wait with bated breath for Friday for things to roll around. So that's the buzz. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Again, thank you for the well wishes on the efforts with my acting stuff. This will be a fun gig that I hope you will see sometime soon on your television. And I want to thank Farquaad for being a great sort of like chat moderator here and throwing up links whenever I would mention something. I really appreciate all of that stuff. If you've got some time and want to go back and watch our Realms of Rothane game, I had a super fun time. It's great to take Dungeon World for a spin. And again, tell your friends on Twitch, tell your friends on the YouTubes, tell your friends wherever you go. We're really trying to make a push to get to 1,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel. So if you can help push that at all, that makes a big difference to us. When we hit 1,000, we get access to YouTube Studios and can do a few different things production-wise that we just can't necessarily do in our current studio setup. We would by no means abandon the place that we have, but telling your friends is the best way you can do that. I will also, oh, is it 10K? We're close to 10K, that's right. It's like, we're like 9,500. I'm sorry. Thanks, Gaurav, for helping me out on that. So, but you know what? Hey, we'll take 1,000 more viewers. Also, I want to caution you, so we have a bunch of great stuff that's in the Chapter 1 in the Dropbox links that I've that we've popped in the chat throughout the show here today. Once we move on to Chapter 2, several of those, not any of the existing stuff, but the more further materials that I produce will probably go directly to a Dropbox folder for our Patreon backers. So if you are thinking about backing us, I suspect it's going to be for sure at the $5 level, possibly at the $10 level. Just depends upon what sort of materials I continue to put together. But I am looking, excuse me, I am looking at having I have a quest flow chart that I've already put together. I'm looking at going through the book and mapping out all of the treasure locations. There's a couple different charts that I actually want to redo because I don't find them in a helpful format. And those little extra bits, right now, hey, the first chapter's free. But those will probably go for those people who back us on Patreon. So, thank you for all of your support. Thank you for watching and listening. I really love you guys. I appreciate you being my fans and listening to me spout my ideas. The mail is here. That means I have to go. Our time is up. The chime has rung. Thank you so much for watching, and let's dungeon.